Hey, welcome to Hustle Estate, episode number 4. I am one of your hosts, Ed Hendrickson.
And I'm Isaac Gilman.
We are today going to talk about the process of purchasing your home. So we're going to tell a couple stories about when we bought our first homes, and hopefully we can give you guys some good information that you guys can use when you buy your first home, or maybe even your next home and you didn't think about the process the first time.
Yeah, we just really want to help you avoid some of the mistakes that we've made along the way and give you some insights into some of the things that we think about when we were both purchasing our home and some of the things that we think about now.
Right.
So I think if you want to start kind of, in our last episode, you talked a little bit about the investment property, well, now investment property, but originally kind of the multifamily home that you were talking about buying and the process you took a little bit behind that. But why don't we jump into, you bought a multifamily home.
Yep.
But why a multifamily home and kind of that, I think you said it was like 6 months. It took you like 6 months. Yep. Why did it take you so long and why multifamily?
So, first part, why multifamily? I had, as I mentioned in the prior episode, I'd always wanted to buy a home. So I was talking to my mortgage broker, explaining to him, I'm going to buy a home. I would live in it for a year or two, move out, rent it, and that was how I was going to acquire my rental portfolio. And as I was discussing with him, he said, why would you do that? And I explained to him my thought process, which was very amateur, I guess you could say at the time. It was new. I didn't really know.
Okay.
I just thought that was the way to do it. I saw, people buy a home, they live in it. I thought, okay, rent it and move on to the next. I really, honestly hadn't educated myself too much on thinking about having multifamilies or what it was going to be like having 5 single family homes. I just wanted to buy. That was really what it was. And
but you wanted to buy because of any reason? Like, did you have a specific idea in mind?
I wanted to really buy. I wanted to start having properties, and I knew that.
Okay. So it was kind of a bigger plan.
Yeah, exactly. It was the earlier I start, then in 30 years it'd be paid off. Or in 10 years I'd be able to have 5. So the quicker I could get going, the better off.
Makes sense.
So I'm talking to my mortgage broker, and I tell him my process, and he tells me about this FHA product that you can get, which is the Federal Housing Authority has a product for first-time home buyers that you can put 3.5% down and purchase your first home.
Which is a pretty low. When you say 3% down, that's 3% of the purchase price.
Correct.
Which is a pretty low.
It's a low down payment.
Low down payment. That's
you
need
at least typically 20% down to buy a home. Yes, there are other products out there, mortgage products, which we can definitely discuss in one episode. But there are other products that you can do that you can put less down, but the typical person is putting 20% down when they buy their home.
Right, which is what I did.
Right. So 3.5% down, and he said you can buy a multifamily and use the rents of the property apply to my income, which would then allow me to buy something more expensive than I could actually afford if I was buying a single family home on my own. Okay. So I was like, okay. I was a little nervous, like, geez, I have tenants and stuff. I was like, I'm going to have tenants in 2 years was my mindset, like not today.
So your plan changed a little bit.
Exactly. So it changed. I pivoted, I adjusted, and I found a realtor in the area of Hamilton, New Jersey, and Dawn Petrozzini. You can check her out. So she helped me find this property, and like we said, we spent probably 6 months trying to find one because we had to find one where the rents made sense for the value of the property. So now this was a whole new game that I was getting involved in. I was just going to buy a home that made sense for me, that I could live in.
Right.
And maybe the home would rent for $2,000. I was just going to make sure my mortgage was going to be less than $2,000, and I'd be winning. That's
after a few years of living there, right?
Exactly.
Well, originally thinking
that.
Yep.
But now I had to find a property that made sense for the mortgage adding in my rents, right? So if I on my own, for example, can afford $2,000, but if I can bring in these 2 other rents, maybe I can afford $3,000 a month for a mortgage. So it's not an easy answer to know. Right. It's more about go find the property, see what you would need to buy that property. So when you normally buy a home, you get pre-qualified for, say, $200,000. So you go find any home under $200,000, and you move on.
Right.
This was not like that because you didn't know what you were qualified for, because you didn't know what the rents were going to be, so you didn't know what you could actually afford.
Got it.
So it was a lot of just, does this deal make sense? What are the rents going to be? Okay. No, this one doesn't make sense. And just kind of going
some
on
math.
and going.
You had to do
exactly,
some math.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just a lot of weekends going out. We actually went back to a couple properties a few times, and even a few times a few months after. And we found a property, and it was, close to where we were living at the time, and it was great. And it was actually a cash flowing property at 3.5% down, which I didn't expect. Normally when you put a low down payment down, you don't have much equity in it per se at the time.
Because you've only put so much cash into it.
Exactly.
Right.
And these properties typically don't cash flow day one. It takes 5 or 10 years to start to cash flow as rents start to catch up and get raised due to inflation. Then
catch up to what? What do you mean catch up to what?
So to surpass your mortgage. So if your mortgage is maybe $2,000 right now, rents might only be $1,800.
Okay.
So eventually rents will raise.
So you basically weren't making like a net profit on your...
Well, I was. In this one I was.
Well, but what you're saying is maybe oftentimes you're not making above that mortgage price,
exactly.
right? So you're losing about $200 in your example per month up until you can raise the rents enough that you're making more than the mortgage. Got it.
Yeah. Especially in areas like Hoboken, it's very popular that if you were to even put 20% down, you're going to basically break even on your mortgage, and you're not going to make money renting in Hoboken. You really have to put a lot of money down to kind of slide those scales.
Because the purchase price is they're astronomically
too
high.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes sense. Yeah, and I did it very differently to you because I was looking for a primary residence,
right.
and I wasn't really looking to make it an investment property by any means. It just so happened that I found something that was in a desirable area, and my situation changed over time. But originally, I put the 20% down. I wasn't thinking about renting it out. Definitely wasn't looking for renters at that time. It's just a condo, right? Like it's
a
not
condo. So hold on, let's take it. So for our viewers who are new, what's a condo?
So a condo is just a designation. It's basically a different type of housing, and it's a specific designation, right? So you have single family homes, multifamily, condos, commercial buildings, etc. And without going into great detail about it, condos have some different aspects of them that a single family home doesn't have. Okay. So the biggest thing is that condos are usually part of a homeowners association.
Okay.
So that means that sometimes you also have what they call planned unit developments, where there's groups of homes that were kind of planned out by an investment company of some sort, where there might be a fee to pay into an organization that kind of helps run and maintain the grounds, or helps come up and set up with the rules.
My parents live in a community like that, actually.
And so, and it's not super, it's not really that much different than a single family home, but there are some loan regulation, or there's some different loan qualities related to condos, which I found out after the fact. So like a warrantable or non-warrantable property, the gist of it is that if a bunch of investors are investing in a building, why should I give you this much less or lower rate, like a traditional residential mortgage, because you're not really trying to own this home as a primary residence. You're an investor. So I'm going to give you an investor-rated mortgage or loan. Whereas properties like condos that I live in, they're all owner-occupied.
Okay.
And that makes a big difference, because if they're not owner-occupied, the bank looks at it as I said, an investment. But if they're owner-occupied, the bank looks at it like, oh, okay, it's more of your primary residence. I'm going to give you the residential loan and the benefit of the doubt that this is going to be, something that you live in for at least a few years, so that we can give you that lower rate.
So it's less riskier to them because you're going to be living.
And actually, for a little while there, I almost wasn't able to get a loan because they had to do their due diligence. The mortgage company had to do their due diligence to verify that it wasn't that the majority of owners lived in those units and weren't renting them out.
Okay.
That was something I had no idea about, and I didn't figure out. Although, I would have never closed on the deal if that wasn't possible. But it was something that I never had thought about before, so it was interesting. But yeah, the HOA, the Homeowners Association, owns the building technically. They have a master plan, and they have bylaws that everybody in the building has to follow. It's just 12 units in the building, but we can't do certain modifications to our units if it changes the appearance, the outside appearance specifically of the building, or like the hallways, for instance. So if I change my door has to have a specific color and style to it to match all the other doors, unless all the other doors, like all the owners in the unit, decide to change their doors.
Are you allowed to change the inside configuration?
Yeah.
If you want? You could put another bedroom in or not. You're allowed to do that?
For the most part. I mean, actually, so my neighbor recently, I recently got a new neighbor that redid their unit. So their unit was a 1-bedroom unit, and they turned it into a 2-bedroom unit. But we all had to get some agreement, basically, to say, yeah, we were okay with this. But if they were like, yeah, we want to buy both units and knock down the walls, so we make this huge unit, that would have to go by all the owners, and we would have to, even probably to some degree, that would change the whole ownership structure, because now somebody owns 2 units, which technically each unit is like a share of the company. Yeah. So everybody has an equal share of the company right now, whereas if somebody owned 2 units, now somebody has 2 shares and everybody else has 1. So that would be kind of a different way to look at it.
Okay. So do you live in a condo or a co-op?
I live in a condo. So it's designated as a condo, definitely not a co-op. Co-ops are different. I don't know as much about them, but I definitely specifically live in a condo.
Okay. So for me, just to jump in there, the difference to me between a condo and a co-op is a condo, you actually, like, you own your portion of the building technically, right?
Right.
Versus a co-op where you actually own shares in the building. So if you have 12 units, you only own 1 share of it. And then you have to go in front of a co-op board, and a lot of times the board has to approve who's moving in and who's not moving in, whereas a condo association, you don't have to do that. But otherwise, they're generally run the same way with the dues, the HOA, and all of that.
Right, so that's a good point. I was using shares kind of as an example of how we own things evenly, but we're not a co-op. But yeah, we definitely still have to pay dues. We do make decisions. We do have a president of our board who kind of organizes everything, but they don't have to approve like new people coming in or anything like that. As long as the seller is able to sell their property free and clear, title is free and clear and all that good stuff, and the buyer is able to get qualified properly,
that's it.
That's really all that's needed, And I think, looking back at it all, I don't know if all lenders would lend for a condo. I'm sure that it is a little bit more complicated because you kind of own your unit, but you don't necessarily own all of the building.
Right.
And that can complicate things from a title perspective, which is kind of a separate topic in and of itself, but definitely something that I didn't think about when I was originally kind of going into that purchase mode. I just wanted to buy something that was easy to maintain. I didn't want a front yard. I didn't want something that was bigger than my means.
Yep.
And the condo just seemed to make the most sense, especially living in a bigger city, living in Detroit. Like, you can buy houses. It's easy to do that for the most part because there's a lot of them. But I wanted something that was in a denser area. And due to that, I wanted to be in more of an apartment style. Yep. And so the condo made sense for me.
I think this is really great information because a lot of people just assume I'm going to buy an apartment because everybody always talks about that they rent an apartment. Like, condos and co-ops are both apartments, but knowing the difference and knowing the guidelines and how getting a mortgage is completely different when you get a condo, than versus getting a single family home.
And some condos look like single family homes, right? You can go to, like, your parents, right? You can go to a community and be like, oh, hey, this looks like a single family home. Or maybe they're like almost like row homes. They're kind of smashed together a little bit more, but yet they're considered condos.
Yep.
And so you just have to kind of understand that. What do I want to purchase? Like, why? I think understanding the why, both of us had that clear. Like, I didn't want to maintain much. I wanted something simple and easy in terms of a place to maintain. It became a little bit more or less simple and easy in terms of the mortgage process. But you wanted to start this rental business, right? You wanted to kind of think about the future. I wanted to and also I wanted to stabilize my rent.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah,
because Detroit, like many other cities, think about New York, right? Like, rents are out of control. And I wanted to know that I had to pay the same amount for the next, 30 years. and I didn't have to worry about that.
Okay.
So that was another reason why I thought about buying in Detroit, because I knew real estate was kind of increasing, and I was expecting actually my rent to go up. So at the time, I kind of just decided, all right, I'm going to get pre-qualified. I work for an arm of a mortgage lender, and I had the opportunity to just like talk to a loan officer quickly and easily and get an idea of like, okay, what can I qualify for based on my income, based on all my credit stuff.
Yep.
And once I did that and figured out what I could reasonably pay per month, I started to make more decisions about, all right, well, here are the areas I want to look in. Here's the areas I like. I knew the city fairly well at that point, that I was pretty comfortable just like figuring it out kind of on my own. Obviously, I had a realtor that helped me open doors and think about things a little differently. But for the most part, I didn't intend on buying originally. I just wanted something to kind of stabilize myself, so it made it simpler.
The last question that I'd have before we move on from this topic would be, can your HOA fee change? Or because
Yes.
you're talking about locking yourself in,
Yeah.
so now is that something that could adjust? And
Yeah, actually, so right now my HOA is talking about raising our fee by almost $100 a month.
wow.
So, and the reason being is it's already really low. So, but it hasn't really changed over the last, I think, since the building was renovated in like 2003.
Okay.
So they haven't adjusted for inflation in quite some time.
Yeah.
So actually, this is something that I would have, if you're looking at condos, I strongly recommend talking to the sellers about looking at their books and understanding those fees. And by books, I mean like, hey, does everybody pay their dues? I don't know, because I didn't ask this question myself. I don't know if they'll actually show you the accounting of it, but I would think that a reasonably knowledgeable or like a smart buyer would say, hey, I want to understand, is everybody paying their dues? Because I ultimately found out that one unit was really behind. Okay. And since then, they've caught up. But it required pressure from the rest of the owners to say, hey, do we want to put a lien on this property if they don't like pay? And we really had to think about that, because you don't want to, those are other people's lives. Just like
thing. It's like evicting somebody.
Right, just like we talked about that. So, yeah, our dues are about to go up about $100 a month, which is not substantial for me overall, but it is something that, when I think it was listed, even it said like $200 a year or $300 a year, whatever it was at the time. And I was like, wow, that's like nothing. Some places I looked at though, like it was almost more than the mortgage per month. It was insane.
Especially like in New York City, if you look there, some of their HOA fees it's wild.
Yeah, it just didn't make any sense. So definitely, if you're looking at condos or co-ops or anything that you have to pay dues for, I would strongly urge you to really think through what are those fees that are associated with living there. Ask the buyer or ask the seller, does everybody pay? Can you get some sort of like balance sheet at the very least? Understand kind of what's in the account. What are some of the upgrades that they want to make? What are the some of the maintenance things that regularly get paid out for the HOA fees, and go from there, because that's really something I didn't think about at all.
That's definitely a great point. I believe there's two main things you should ask for. Is a condo questionnaire, which kind of goes through some of those questions you're asking, and then you can ask for their financials, or you should ask for their financials, so that way you can be prepared, as you said.
I mean, and so like think about it from, I guess, your standpoint. You were thinking, all right, I'm going to live in a single family home and rent it out eventually, but then you bought this multifamily. How did you know somebody was going to like live there? How did you make that decision to say, all right, I can live here, so somebody else should be able to live here? Like, why did that seem like a good idea? Or how did you make the decision of, all right, if I have a spare bedroom, like not even Airbnb, right? If I have a spare unit, this is good enough to rent at X price.
Well, I knew that by doing my research and not intentional research, but by going and seeing so many of these multifamily properties, I was able to see if they weren't rented. And going through the process as part of looking at the multifamily, I was always getting the information of what the rents were or could be if you were to rent each unit. So I saw so many different things and so many different setups. So I was starting to get a good idea of, okay, what is this going to rent for? What's that going to rent for? How much could I get? So that's where I started to get that knowledge from, was just going from property to property. Some properties had tenants in them and some didn't. And honestly, most of the ones that I looked at didn't have them, because
Really?
yeah, a lot of people want to buy and start fresh. They want to choose their own tenants. So
I see what you're saying.
It's
I
more
gotcha.
desirable to sell a vacant property than to sell a rented property.
Okay.
Especially to a first-time home buyer. To an experienced investor, they might say, "Okay, great, I'll take it fully rented. Like this is great, I'll figure it out. I'm making rents day one." I happened to actually buy something that it was occupied. So so it's a 3-unit. Somebody was living in my unit, and they moved out of my unit and moved into one of the other units on the property.
So you live in one unit, you have another person that was already living in, let's just say, unit number 2 of 3, and then you had a third empty?
So unit 3 had somebody, they stayed.
Okay.
Unit 2, that person was leaving.
Got it.
Just like their lease was up, they were at some point throughout this process going to be leaving. And unit 1, someone was living in,
right?
But I wanted to live in unit 1, so they moved to 2.
Got it.
And then I moved into 1, so now it was fully occupied. Day 1.
So did you have to like redo leases and things like that?
No. So actually, it's a really good question, because when you buy a property that has tenants in the state of New Jersey, tenants have an unbelievable amount of rights. So they actually, if you buy a property with a lease, you have to
uphold
that lease. Exactly. The only thing that there are different things you can do. If the rent is unreasonably below market rent, you can, send them a letter to ask them to raise their rent, and then that becomes like, a junction point where yes,
but
I'll take it.
What if you
have to leave?
Could you raise it by like, all right, so let's say they're paying $1,000 a month, and like market rate would say they should be paying $2,000 a month.
Right.
Could you be like, oh, now you should pay $3,000 a month?
No, you have to go to market rate.
Okay,
so you have to say this is what market rate is going to be, and you have to give them the option to go to market rate. If they say no, then you can ask them to leave. But that's not to say the next guy who comes, you can't say I'm renting it for $3,000.
Got it.
In order to get them out, if they're well below market rate, they have to have the option to get to market rate to be fair.
All right.
So now I have this property, and I was moving into 1 unit, which is the largest unit, and then I have the 2 tenants in the other 2 units.
Interesting.
Which is good and bad. I mean, I have plenty of stories as the eviction process and stuff. I mean, I do see the benefit of finding your own tenants. But for me, at first, I was taking on such a large payment that I was very happy to have some people paying part of my mortgage day 1.
Okay.
So that was important to me.
So that helps you with like cash flow and just making sure you can make that mortgage payment.
Yeah.
What about, so you said you looked at all these properties and you kind of got an idea of how, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Mm-hmm. You got an idea of like what you wanted to buy. You said I think it took you about like 6 months. Yeah. Would it take you another 6 months to buy a multifamily, or do you think like 2 months is enough? How long? Like you said you looked for a while, but
I mean, now it would probably take me, because it's a completely different mindset, because I'm not going to be living in the next property, in the next multifamily. So now I know areas where I want to buy multifamily properties, and I can quickly look at the property and see if it cash flows. And there's a lot more inventory around here. So where I was looking in Hamilton, specifically Hamilton is next to Trenton, but I was looking in Hamilton away from Trenton. It was more of a like single family home community.
Got it.
So it was harder to find these multifamilies in the area. Now where I'm looking for multifamilies, I'm looking in these city areas like, not specifically Hoboken, but more of like an Elizabeth or a Newark, those areas that actually have more of a population that live in multifamily units.
Okay.
So it gives me a lot more opportunity to buy. There's a lot more product out there, and it also just makes things easier. Like all 2 bedrooms are renting for X, all 3 within $50 to $100 difference. There's not too much of a question about it. Most things are set up kind of the same way, so the process will be a lot easier. So yes, when I go to, but I've recently bought another multifamily, and the decision was kind of like, I called my broker at the time and I said, hey, do you have any multifamilies? He said, yeah, I have one. And I was like, great, send me the financials. And I mean, the decision was made in 40 days.
More so math than like actual foot on the ground experience.
Yeah.
So you said you bought another one. What, from your first experience, like what did you do with your second experience? Aside from the math, like did you go in there and you're like, I need to fix that. I need to fix that. Like, let me make sure like the lights are working. What was the biggest difference?
Well, this one is very different than buying your own home. I mean, the house needed to be completely redone.
Okay.
So
okay.
it was this, everything needed to be redone. The stairs from the first floor to the third floor apartment were partially falling apart.
Okay.
The bathrooms,
So how do you even
walk into the bathroom, let alone, check to see if the lights worked.
All right.
So it was between the second and third floor. The stairs were kind of, they were weak, so you just walked, instead of being second in the middle, you just walked along the side or took, 2 or 3 steps extra to get through. So I just had my contractor come out pretty quick. He went through, gave me an idea of what it was going to cost to fix. And then I went the investment route, the hard money, getting a rehab loan, that kind of
all right.
deal with that property.
So going back to your like originally it was your primary residence,
exactly.
right? Like, what were some things? So we both went through the inspection process, right? And you took a lot longer than I did. I only took about 2 months to like find the condo that I wanted to buy. You took about 6 months. I obviously was looking for it, not from an investment angle. You were. But I think we both had similarities in terms of we go into these properties and we start looking at things and figuring out like, oh, could I live here?
Yep.
One of the reasons I didn't want to live or I didn't buy one of the places I looked at was it was overpriced. It was 800 square foot studio, and I saw something similarly priced that was a full 1 bedroom.
Yep.
That was like one of the things that I kind of realized real quick. What was something that you looked at with your multifamily that you were like, oh, let me make sure that this is how I want it to be, aside from the math?
So one thing that was important to me was the shower.
The shower.
So when so my wife now, but at the time my girlfriend and I, we had moved a couple times just through jobs changing from area to area.
Okay.
So we had rented a bunch of times, and I feel that when you go, at least I was doing this every time we rent. You kind of walk through quick, and you're like, can we make this work? Can this work for a year? Right? You're not thinking that I'm necessarily going to live here for 10 years, right? So you just walk through, is there enough room for my bed? Is there enough room for my couch? Try not to buy new furniture, pull the stuff from one place to the next. But the one thing I realized that we never really checked was the shower.
Okay.
And,
what is it about the shower? Why
the shower pressure that's what I'm concerned about. Because some people like not much shower pressure or a lot of shower pressure. So there are places you go and you turn the shower on and it's like, a fire hose coming out. In some places it's like the mist setting on your garden hose. So you just don't really know. And unfortunately when you're renting until you move in, and then you turn the shower on right after you moved in, you're all sweaty, you're trying to get yourself cleaned up.
That's
and
funny.
You get shot with a fire hose out of the thing.
Man, I had something super similar. So when my parents were selling their house, like in the town we grew up in, they had a burner on their stove that was broken. And I don't think they ever fixed it. And I remember them saying, like, I hope the buyers don't like turn on the stove. So I turned on the stoves in like all the places I went to. Some of them were electric, but the gas ones that I looked at, like I was like, all right, I got to make sure that these work. Yeah,
that's so funny.
That's so funny.
Because I would never turn the stove on. I don't think that would not be something I would even.
I wouldn't. I don't know if I turned the faucets on. I think I might have flushed the toilets. I don't remember. So okay, I guess like that. So not compromising on like the quality of things. I mean, you're gonna live there. Right. You want things to be right.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you make any asks of the seller? Like, I want this fixed, or like keep this.
Yep. So as an investor, I would hate me as the buyer.
Why?
I was pretty aggressive. I had the home inspection done.
Okay.
And there was quite a bit of things that needed to be done.
What's an example? What was the biggest thing?
The biggest thing actually was there was one of the bedrooms had been originally, I guess years and years ago, a porch that was converted to a 3-season room and then converted and closed in to actually be part of the home and become a bedroom. But one of the footings below it, when you walked through the bedroom, you felt the floor buckle.
Oh, that's not good.
So it actually, when we did our home inspection, the guy looked under and the cement footing had started to crumble. So that's what it was. It was just that when you put the pressure on, it crumbled, because it just really, it's not that I wouldn't say it wasn't installed correctly. It's just that it was originally a porch that's now a actual part of your home. It just wasn't meant to be that for that long and bear that weight. So we actually had him install a new new footings underneath that portion of the house. And the homeowner refused. He just kept saying to me, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And I said, just walk into the bedroom and you'll feel the floor buckle. Like, that is not natural. That's not just the linoleum floor, like with an air bubble or something. And you felt the whole thing move. So, it's a lot of this back and forth. Like, you send out your contractor. No, I want to send my contractor. We did that a couple times. And his contractor actually said, yes, it should be fixed. But, he said it, let's say this little portion could be fixed. And my contractor went out and was like, you need a whole new footing. So we negotiated, my contractor went out and actually did it properly. So that way it was a brand new footing.
Have you had any issues with it since?
No.
Nice. So talking about that, did you, did they pay for that or did you negotiate that in the sale price?
No, so he paid for that. He actually did that with the money out of his pocket. So it was all these things that I was very tough on. But
that's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not just, you obviously had this longer term plan, but at the time, like, you didn't know how long it would be until you could buy more properties. And if you're going to live there for 5 years, let's say, you wanted it to be a quality home that you wanted to actually live in.
And I had time. I was renting an apartment. I had been living in that apartment for 6 months. I had another 6 months on my lease. I was breaking the lease when I moved. So I kept telling the guy, he's like, oh, I don't want to budge. And I'm like, put your property back on the market. You've spent money, I've spent money. And I kept leveraging this. You spend money, I spend money. He started to spend a little bit more money because, my money was just the inspection. But a lot of people feel when you're selling like, oh, that guy's come so far, he won't actually pressure me to do this stuff. And I'm telling him a $5,000 fix for a footing versus the $2,000 that I've spent already, I'm willing to walk away because then I have to now spend another $5,000 to have that fixed,
right,
along with the couple other things
that
I was requesting throughout the process as well.
All right. And did you go through your real estate agent to get that stuff done, or did you?
So my attorney actually did.
Is that 'cause of how New Jersey works, or did you use an attorney for a specific reason?
So New Jersey, North Jersey at least, most people use an attorney. South Jersey, a lot of it is not used by an attorney. Okay. The real estate agent will handle it.
Got it.
But I had an attorney from day one. In New Jersey, they go through an attorney review process. So during the attorney review process, I had that attorney. I got the inspection back, and he was actually the one who communicated back and forth with their attorney.
Okay.
To have it done.
And did your attorney also negotiate the sale price?
No, so my agent and I negotiated the sale price, and then we negotiated outside of that the repairs. The negotiated sale price stayed the same throughout the whole process. We never changed the sale price. So you
never went below asking?
I paid more than asking, partly because I had some of my closing costs financed into the loan, so it did go above asking because of that. Okay. But I believe, if I remember correctly, I think we offered him asking, and we never lowered from there to have the things fixed because I never took money to have something fixed.
Interesting.
I might have for a couple $100,
right?
But the big items I had him fix. Yeah. I didn't want to because I don't know if you agree with this, but to me he's saying I could lower it $5,000, and I'm only putting 3.5% down.
I see what you're saying.
So that's only $500 to me or something, not much. Now I still have to pay the $5,000 to fix it, so I still have to come up with $4,500.
Right.
Whereas he's getting a check, so I'm saying he should pay for this cost.
Yeah. So I did two things. One was I didn't ask for that many repairs. It was pretty turnkey. Like, it was not. Okay. And it sounds like yours is too. And when we say turnkey, we mean you literally turn the key and you can live there.
Yeah. Nothing needs to be done.
Nothing major needs to be done.
Move-in ready.
Yeah, move-in ready. Yeah. So I found that there were a few windows that weren't working, and it wasn't the windows themselves are usually windows can be really expensive. But it was just kind of the cranks had weren't working properly, and some of the mechanical stuff needed to be replaced. So they did that. But I also started negotiating. So I probably went down $20,000 on asking price.
Wow.
And
from day one, was that based off your offer? So they asked.
Yeah. So I made the offer about $20,000 lower than what they were asking. They came back with, "Hey, this is where we want to go." I said, "Okay, I'll go up this much more." So I went I went 16,000 or so below their asking price.
Okay.
But we did negotiate around that $6,000 basically, or $4,000.
Of the work being done?
No, not the work,
okay.
just the purchase, just the purchase price. The work being done on their end was like, I think under $1,000, under $1,000. It wasn't much. The windows were the big thing. They left some stools there that I was okay with, but for the most part, like the unit was in pretty good shape, so not much needed to be done.
That's not bad at all.
No,
That's
no.
very good.
From like, yeah, they maintained it really well. They were original owners from when it was totally redone, and so aside from some appliances, and that's a learning lesson for me was, what are some of the thinking about like, okay, I saved $16,000 from the asking price. I probably could have gone lower for two reasons. One was getting a loan for a condo was more complicated than I expected. And second of all, I don't think the appliances and other things were at the point where, or they were close to the point where they would quote unquote expire, right? So I recently replaced my water tank.
Okay.
Because I was afraid that it was going to go bad. And so could I have negotiated that? No, but maybe they knew that, and so they were like, all right, if we go down what was it, $14,000 or whatever, $16,000, like he'll end up paying for these things like pretty quickly anyway.
Yep.
So it's like actually a win for us no matter what. And then when you look at like when you go to the city record, or like after your information's recorded, I went down to the city for some tax information, and I looked at what they purchased the property for originally, and it was like, I mean, in Detroit, property prices have gone up drastically, and not drastically as in it's a bubble, although some people could make that argument at least over the last few years, but it was like just from the recession point onward, just the amount of recovery that's happened in the area of Detroit that I live, like they made their money back and more.
Okay.
So they weren't like underwater or anything. It's also, I kind of found this out later on. They were a little more on the desperate side. I didn't know this, but they were trying to buy a home, and they needed to get rid of their property to be able to put a down payment or whatever on this other home that was more expensive than the condo that I ultimately bought. So those are some things I would factor in if you're looking at anything, right? Like, I don't know, did yours come with appliances?
It did, yeah.
Did you think about like appliances and like the length of time appliances last and how long they've been in the unit and how much like longer you could use them?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't think about that at all. I have had to replace different things off different appliances throughout the time, but no, I didn't. I was just happy that, honestly, first house was like, great, I'm gonna have a refrigerator. Like, this is awesome. You know, I was just so excited of the process, and I was so concerned about not getting hurt over the larger items.
Right.
I stopped. I didn't even think, like I said, I mean, there's a refrigerator. Who cares? You know, that was my mindset of it. You know, I was concerned about these larger, scarier things.
Right. Well, I mean, a water tank wasn't like super expensive, but it did cost it did cost money. I would say though that if the refrigerator like went out like a few months after I bought the unit, I'd be pretty upset. I'd be like, well, I don't know how much a refrigerator costs because I haven't had to replace it, like knock on wood. But I would imagine it's probably $1,000 or so. Maybe a little, at least one to fit in the area that I want and like looks like the kitchen that I have. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
It's always tough.
It's not just like buy a refrigerator.
Exactly, because that's what happened to me. My tenants, I've replaced their hot water tank. It's a small hot water tank, so it's one of the ones like
the compact, energy efficient ones.
On a shelf. I've had to replace a stove. The stove was actually really expensive because it's a small apartment. So the larger stove would have been cheaper, but the fact that I had to get a 24-inch stove to fit into the corner, and you're buying an old version because they don't make that size anymore. All those kinds of things, but I've been lucky. Like you said here, that this has been happening years after buying. Nothing really broke day one. This is just on the time frame of owning a house. Yeah. Except I own, in essence, 3 houses by having, and I say that because I have 3 refrigerators, 3 stoves, 3 hot water tanks. Like, it's bound
right.
that, like,
you have triple of everything.
It's more likely that something's going to go at some point versus having, one set of these things.
Yep.
So it's, just going through that, but it's definitely been an experience. And, anytime, luckily for my side, I can write it off against my rents because it's on my investment property.
You have that.
So I
don't necessarily have, well, I have it more than I did. Yeah.
So, but other than that, I mean, the process was, I would say, fairly smooth, except for that I was stubborn about that. But, and mine, I knew that I was going to potentially have to do work. It wasn't in the great, it wasn't a perfect home, but it didn't have to be perfect. I knew what I could collect in rents today, and I knew what an upgraded apartment would collect in rents.
Yeah.
So actually, the first 6 months to a year of us living there, we did redo a lot of stuff. We gutted the bathroom and replaced the bathroom, except we left the original tub. We put in, a vent in the ceiling. We refinished all the cabinets in the kitchen. We put new countertops in, a new oven hood. So we knew we were gonna have to do some of this stuff, and we just did it slowly, while we were living there. Since rent, my living expense was less than it would have been if I was renting somewhere, at least specifically that size. So what I always did was I charged myself rent, so I paid extra into a checking account where I paid my mortgage out of. So this way I was always growing.
Okay, so you could reinvest it if you wanted to, or just a rainy day fund if something bad happened. All right,
so that kind of grew into what I have now, is that I have a checking account for that house, and I just let it build up. And if anything happens, I just dip into the fund. And I've had times where it's gone back down close to zero, and then I've had times where I've had a few $1,000s in there. So I just really try not to take any money out if I don't need it for myself personally. Right.
All right. So, I mean, I think we can begin wrapping up this conversation. It sounds like you and I both have some similar takeaways. I would say one of the biggest things, just from listening to you as well as through my experiences, do your homework.
Yes.
Take the time to walk through homes. I know you hear a lot about people falling in love and heartbreak over not getting their home. Sometimes that's okay because your dream home may have more problems than you think. But I think especially in, if you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, you really get a good understanding of, what you should really, the questions you should be asking, the things you should be thinking about during inspection time, or even, like you said, you got an FHA loan. I got a standard, fixed rate 30-year mortgage. There are other loan products out there. Talk to your real estate agent or loan officer about those products. Maybe you qualify, maybe you don't. But if you know more and you're able to ask those questions, that can help you drastically. And,
definitely.
And turn on the shower.
Yeah.
Right?
or the stove.
Right. So, I don't know. I think, is there anything else that you would, really think about? Maybe from more of an investment standpoint, the rent piece, the math?
Even from that, just ask questions, right? I was buying an investment property in an area I didn't know. I asked my realtor hundreds of questions and
it's their job to that's their job.
Yep, and they're okay with it, right? These people, a lot of real estate agents want to educate people and help them buy the home that's best for them.
Yep.
So as maybe she got tired of driving around with me for 6 months. I mean, we weren't going every weekend. There weren't that many opportunities, but she answered my questions. My mortgage broker actually became a fairly big mentor in my real estate career so far.
Okay.
Because I ended up finding out he's an investor. He owned a 22-unit building. He had a couple other properties in Hoboken. So he taught me a lot about the mortgage process and the landlord process.
Got it.
So just ask questions. You are paying these guys for this. Like you said, number one, do your homework. But even if you can't find that answer somewhere else, ask them. If they don't know it, they'll know somebody else who knows the answer. So get educated and ask as many questions as you want. This is your home.
Right. You're spending a lot of money, whether it's through a loan or a down payment or whatever. Yeah. It's a big purchase. But once you invest your money, right, you're not super liquid. You can't just be like...
There's no return necessarily, right?
So you're definitely not guaranteed any return, but you're also not guaranteed to sell quickly, right? Maybe it's a great market, but for whatever reason your home doesn't sell and I need money quick. Yep. Now you're put in a tough situation.
Yep. Yeah, and don't spend your last dollar kind of to that point, because once you start looking at the process, you'll realize that it was a little bit more expensive than you think. You start adding in title and insurance, and you pay your first quarter taxes at closing. you are putting a lot of money out of your pocket. So make sure you have a good reserve, because you don't know if you're going to find out that one burner doesn't work when you buy the home.
Right.
And you want to get a new stove. So you want to have a few bucks in your pocket to make sure you get that done.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So instead of plugging some resources at the end of, like normally like we do at the end of our show, we just kind of wanted to hammer home the point of make sure you do your homework. You know, you're spending a lot of money here when you're buying a property, whether it's for an investment, whether it's for your primary residence, whether it's a second home, whatever, you know. And I think to your point, Ed, like ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yep. Use your resources. Your plugs for this episode should be your realtor, your mortgage broker, your title company. You know, ask the questions. What does this mean? What's on title? Get educated about every step in the process. You know, who knows? You might be able to become a resource to somebody else.
Also, feel free to reach out to Ed.
Yeah, definitely. Reach out to me through my website, edhendrickson.com. I've bought a few properties, so I can definitely answer questions from in a personal home. I bought more than one personal home, and I bought more than one investment property, and I've sold a couple of them as well. So I've been on both sides, so I can help anybody who's looking to buy or looking to sell. And
you can reach us at hustlestate1. Again, that's hustlestate1@gmail.com. Ed and I both look at that email, so we can both, you know, figure out how to answer your question best. But definitely reach out. We're also on Instagram now. We're on Twitter. Yeah. Just our tags are Hustle Estate. So check us out there.
Put your note down here if you want to comment.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, thanks for listening, and have a good one.
Thanks, guys.